Good morning. Got another question today. Real estate talk. Talk and walk. Walk and talk. So, what are the tax advantages? Somebody reached out to me and said, what are some of the tax advantages of real estate investing? And there are a ton of real estate. I mean, you hear about this, right? You hear that there's a bunch of tax advantages, which is critical to any kind of investment. Like, you've got to understand the tax implications of an investment, or just in life in general. So here's how the American system works, right? So if you have a W-2 job, you get paid, you make money, they take out your taxes, and then whatever you have left, you pay your bills with, right? So earn, taxes, expenses, and then lastly, it's what you get to keep, right? Your money. So imagine if you're self-employed and you're a full-time real estate agent, or if you're a tax classified as a full-time real estate investor. Don't have to be an agent. That's a big misnomer. You don't actually have to be an agent to be able to take advantage of some of these taxes. So the way it works, if you're a full-time real estate professional, which means you've got to have 750 hours a year in real estate, and it pretty much has to be kind of your primary thing. So, and I'll give you some tips on this. Again, I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax advisor. This is what I've learned, and this is just, the way it's written. See, the U.S. government, they want to incentivize you to be an entrepreneur, and especially in real estate. So what they do is they allow you to take some deductions that you wouldn't normally get as a W-2 employee. So there's a lot to this, so just stay tuned. Sorry, I'm choking here. Yes, I am walking around a parking lot. Not very exciting. There's the woods. There's just a bunch of thorns in there, or I'd be all up in there. So where to start? Okay, so imagine instead of doing it, you make $1, you pay taxes of, let's say 25 cents, 30 cents. So you got 70 cents left. Let's say your bills are 40 cents. This is all relative, right? So now you've got 30 cents remaining. If I did the math right, made $1, 30% taxes, 40 cents in expenses, and you got 30 cents left to live, right? Food, savings, investing, those type things. So you got 30 cents left. Now imagine you're a real estate investor, okay? And you make $1. You take your expenses out, right? That's how it works. So let's say your expenses are 40 cents. So now you've got 60 cents. Now you get taxed at the rate as if you made 60 cents as opposed to $1. So now instead of paying 30 cents in taxes, you pay 20. So how does that advantage work to you? I mean, right out of the gate, you're keeping an extra 10 cents. So same 40 cent expenses, you're down to 60 cents. Now you're paying 20 cents in taxes. So now you've got 40 cents to pay your bills and live on, as opposed to 30 cents in scenario one. Now, it gets even better. One of the beauties of real estate, now that's any entrepreneur, right? So that's whether you own a vending machine business, or you're a plumber, or anything. But where real estate gets sexy is the government allows you to do something called take depreciation. So you take that $100,000 house, okay, minus the land, but we won't get technical in that. Let's just say it's a $100,000 house. They're going to let you depreciate that over 27 and a half years. So let's say that's another, let's call it $4,500. So you can actually use that $4,500 to offset the taxes that are due. So it's you kind of have to see it worked out on paper to fully understand it. But there's no other thing out there that lets you depreciate like that. And then there's something even beyond that, which before I even get into that, there's something called accelerated depreciation, where you can literally offset all of your earnings from the cash flow. Okay. So let's give you a real world example. Okay. All right. Let's do this. You buy a $100,000 house. That's always my favorite example. Write this down because it's going to make more sense if you see it on paper, even though I'm walking and talking it. Check my math on it because I'm doing it from my head. So, all right. So you buy a $100,000 house and you're charging $1,500 in rent. Okay. Let's say your total expenses come out to 40 cent. So let's say you're cash flowing after mortgage and everything. Let's say you're cash flowing $500 a month. Let's just say. So that $100,000 house, so you're making, let's say you're making $400 a month cash flow. Cash flow is the king in real estate, right? I'll tell you that 1,000,000 times. Cash flow. Don't bank on appreciation. Don't bank on Airbnb. These are all kind of, they could all pan out, and I do those things myself, but cash flow. It's all about cash flow. So you're making $400 a month, right? $4,800 a year. Now, what do? What we're used to as W-2 employees is we make $4,800, big deal. That's not exciting, right? Maybe it's a car payment, small car payment. But then you got to pay taxes on it, right? Nope. So remember, you get the depreciation. So let's say depreciation on a $100,000 house is $4,500. So you made $4,800 as far as Uncle Sam's concerned. Now you write off the depreciation, which is $4,500. So really you're only showing $300 worth of profit, which quite honestly, you're probably offsetting that with interest expense on the mortgage. So, it's a big deal, Dave. So I made $4,500. I get to keep, it is a big deal. The tax advantage is you made $4,500 and you get to keep $4,500. You pay taxes on $300 maybe, right? Which is like, I don't know, $60, $100, something like that. So let's say, $120. So you made $4,800, but you paid $120 in taxes. It's pretty good. Couldn't do that with a W-2 job. Super not exciting though. Now take 10 rental homes. Imagine bringing home, $45,000 a year and keeping all of it. Imagine you have 20 rental homes. Imagine making $90,000 and keeping all of it. You see how being self-employed as a real estate investor, if you're making $90,000 and keeping $90,000, it's the equivalent of making $130,000, $140,000 in a W-2 job. So one of the biggest aha moments for me was when I was working. I worked for a bank for 20 years and, enjoyed it. I don't have one of those stories where it's like my boss was a jerk. I had a great boss. I had a great company I worked for. But when I left the bank and became financially independent, I wasn't making as much as I was making at the bank because I didn't have to. You follow me? Something to think about. So you don't necessarily have to replace your income dollar for dollar to replace your income dollar for dollar. Hadn't had a shower, man. I don't know what my hair is doing here. This is something funky. So now I'm going to up the ante a little bit more. Imagine that you're married, okay? Good guess that 50% of you watching this are married. So you have a spouse. Say that spouse is stay-at-home mom, working part-time somewhere, doing something. So if you have enough, say, properties, let's say, to offset, to be able to justify 750 hours, worth of real estate, they become the real estate investor. Okay, they become the full-time real estate investor. Don't have to go get your real estate license. Don't have to take a bunch of classes. You need to be managing your own properties and being able to justify that you're doing. If you have one rental property, you ain't gonna be claiming that you're working on it 750 hours, right? If you got a couple properties, you got a multiplex, that type thing, you can justify doing it. Again, I'm sure there's some tax codes for this. I don't know what they are. Look them up, Google it. But the advantage of this is, odds are your depreciation and your expenses and things like that are going to with depreciation, maybe more than the cash flow that you've got coming in. Okay? So you can actually use the losses to offset your spouse's W-2 income. You see what I'm saying? So like, if your W-2 income is $100,000 and you can show losses in real estate of $10,000, not only are you not paying money on the cash flow that you're making, and remember, this is depreciation over 27 and a half years. This isn't like a one-time thing, which there is a one-time thing, which I'll tell you about here in a sec, but not yet. So imagine you're not only keeping that cash flow that's coming in, right, but you're offsetting, let's just in this example, $10,000 worth of your spouse's W-2 income, which means they're not paying money on their W-2 income. Or maybe it moves them to a lower bracket. You know, instead of $100,000, now they're making $90,000. So, man, get a good CPA. If you're going to be in real estate, get a good CPA, get familiar with these laws. One of the books that got me into real estate, quite honestly, was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure you probably heard of this book. He's got another book out there. It's called Tax Loopholes. They call it loopholes. I don't know. That was 20 years ago. I don't know what they call it now. It's not loopholes. We want to call it loopholes because that's sexy and sounds covert. But these are all laws that were written to encourage people to own real estate. Because here's the thing. When you own real estate, you're employing a bunch of people. Like, I may not pay crazy amounts of income tax because I own a bunch of real estate and take advantage of some of these laws that are written to encourage entrepreneurs like myself. But I pay a boatload of taxes and property taxes and insurance and payroll and all of this type stuff. So think of how many contractors you use, painters, plumbers, insurance agents. I mean, you're employing a lot of people when you have real estate. And that's what the government and economists want you to do. They want to stimulate that. So one other thing, which this is jumping deep in the weeds here, but it's really important. Let's say you're a doctor. I always like to use that one because everybody just thinks that doctors make like insane amounts of money. But they do make big money, and they do make them W-2. They need something to offset their income, okay? There's syndications and investments that you can make that if you're an accredited investor, which if you're a doctor, you're pretty much going to be an accredited investor. You can invest in that, and rather than taking the cash flow, you can get a slice of the pie that is going to get you depreciation, which is what you want. Really what you want is to offset your W-2 income. So if you're a high W-2 earner, that might be something to look into. Is how do I essentially, I don't know if you can call it this, but really what you're doing is you're buying depreciation. So imagine this. Imagine you're at a 40% tax bracket. Every $100,000 in depreciation you can buy saves you $40,000 year one. And that's through something called, the biggest tool is called accelerated depreciation. This is when you purchase something and you have to do a lot of what's called value add. You're putting a lot of, maybe you're replacing roofs, replacing appliances, replacing carpet. You're doing big ticket items that rather than depreciating a carpet over 27 and a half years, which wouldn't really be fair. We know carpets, especially in rental homes, are good for about 3 years maybe. They let you depreciate that cost over a much shorter period of time. So you get these big ticket items and you can write them off year one, and then maybe the investor doesn't need the depreciation because they're not cash flowing that year, so they may sell it off. I don't think it's technically done that way, but that's essentially what's happening. Where a doctor who's making a lot of W-2 income can maybe get a smaller slice of the pie, right? So it's not dollar for dollar. Like, for example, let's say you're buying a $100,000 house, they give you $10,000. You're not going to get 10% ownership, which would be a math equation on that. They might get 2%. Now, why would they do that? Because they gave you $100,000, they own 2%, they're going to get cash flow, and in year one, they're going to get 40 grand of that 100,000 back in tax savings. So, there, as you can tell, there's whole books written on just this subject. So, but I would say the biggest aha moment, biggest thing I want to share with you guys is it does not have to be dollar for dollar. You can retire through real estate making, I'd say if you get within 60% of your W-2 income in cash flow, that you could step away comfortably. Because you got to remember too, it's not just the cash flow is what you use to pay your bills, but we hadn't even started talking about like appreciation. So appreciation would be that $100,000 house is now worth $105,000 next year. You can't go buy groceries with that, but you can, that does go into your net worth, and you could refinance and pull some of that cash out at some point. We hadn't started talking about principal reduction. Every time you make that mortgage payment, your net worth is going up by $100, $150. We did talk about the tax savings. Hopefully you bought it right. So, you didn't pay $100,000 for that $100,000 house. You paid $100,000 for that house that's worth $115,000. And then maybe you do some fix-ups to it, make it worth $150,000. So, advice would be, so how do you get started? God, man, you can't just pick up the phone and call a CPA, right? There's so few CPAs that understand real estate tax. It took me a long time to find one. I would advise, again, as always, get a mentor. Just get a coach. Really get a coach. Get a coach that'll show you the numbers. And not one of these rah-rah coaches that's like, you can do it. Get somebody that's got experience. They're all going to have experience. But somebody that's maybe going to be a little bit more hands-on. Let's see, any recommendations on finding a good one? I don't think I'm getting all the breaks I could get. Like I said, it's hard to find a good CPA. Shoot. And I can't even remember mine right now. I would totally give you his because he does. Oh my gosh. I'm drawing a blank on the CPA. Man. I'll have to get it for you. Shoot me a DM and I'll send it to you. He's good. He's knowledgeable. And I think he charges me, just to give you an idea, I want to say he's $1,500 a quarter, but I have a lot of properties. So, it probably wouldn't be that much. So, what's that, $6,000 a year? It ain't cheap. It ain't H&R Block. But it's well worth it if you have enough property. So, it really just depends on how many properties that you have. But I would say interview the CPA. Don't, an H&R Block, a place like that ain't going to understand it. They're just not. So you need a good CPA, and just talk to them. Hey, listen, how do you handle Schedule E's? Talk to me about, ask them about the Augusta rule. Okay, that's a good piece of advice. If they don't know about the Augusta rule, move on, because that is a fantastic. Basically, the Augusta rule allows you to rent out your house to your corporation for, I believe it's either 10 days or 2 weeks a year, and write it off. Totally legal. It was created because down in Augusta, where they have the Masters, all of these people rent their houses out for that week of the Masters, and some senator had some power and got it passed. So the Augusta rule, if they don't know the Augusta rule, move on. And then properties. All right, I have 2 rentals, and I'm an LP in a syndication. Great. And I've financed 2 deals in PA. Yeah, so you got some creative stuff going on. So you need a good CPA. Sit them down and say, hey, how would you handle my situation? That's what I did. And if you've got some vehicles too, if they're over 5,000 pounds, you need to be writing those off too. So you need to get creative. It sounds like you've got some good diversification going on. Not a lot you can do with the syndication because you're an LP. But you got a couple finance deals. Can't get any depreciation on that, but you've got 2 rentals, so you can get some depreciation on that. What does the Augusta rule do for 1? So, okay, imagine and I promise you this, that is not in regards to a broken toilet or a leaky faucet, because I do not get those calls, which will be another call for another answer for another day. So what the Augusta rule does is, first off, you got to have a corporation, right? So you have to have an LLC. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then what you do is, if you got a 2-bedroom, probably somebody trying to buy some of my properties. Okay, so if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, let's say, and you would go on there and maybe Airbnb, say, hey, what would my house rent on an Airbnb? And the Airbnb says, hey, your house would rent for $250 a day. Okay, then you take $250 times 10, that's $2,500, and you literally write that off on your taxes as a business expense. Now, you have to draw up a lease between you and your corporation. Talk to your CPA. I don't think so. But even if you do, schedule it for the week you're going on vacation. You know, freaking $2,500. Go to Disney World for a day. That's about all you can get at Disney World. Believe me, I just got back in November. It's well worth it. It's worth every dime, even though I don't agree with any of their woke policies. I do love Disney World, and there's just nothing like it. So yes, definitely check on the Augusta rule, because that's a amazing tax write-off. Now, one thing I haven't even touched on, and this is just being self-employed in general, is you got to get creative. Now, don't go crazy. Don't like write off your entire cell phone, or I don't even write off my house, but you can do that. You can write off a portion of your house, like if you have an office space. But there are a lot of tax deductions. Like, you can write off a part of your cell phone. You can write off some of your food. You can write off some of your clothing if it's in line with what you do, right? Like, if you're, like, for example, you're going to these real estate meetings, joining a bunch of other investors, you might need a nice suit. You know, you don't want to show up there dressed like I am, like you just are walking around in a parking lot in the middle of the day, probably getting arrested by security here for stalking or loitering or something. I'm actually waiting to get my car. Yeah, so I'm killing time, get my steps in. So hopefully this helped. Taxes is one of the most misunderstood and mistaken advantage of. Think about this. You've heard of all these, billionaires, Warren Buffett paying less in taxes than his secretary. Don't be a hater. Like, listen, appreciate that they have There's a reason they wrote those laws into effect. Just learn how to play the game. Don't be hating on Warren Buffett because he didn't pay taxes. He pays his fair share in property and luxury tax and self-employment or personal tax, salary. I don't know what the word is for it. So just listen, learn the system, learn the rules of the game, take advantage of it. And if you want to call it a loophole, call it a loophole. But the bottom line is, do you want to keep the money? Do you want to give it to Uncle Sam? You wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you weren't thinking outside the box. So good luck with that. If you have any other questions, hit me up. kingsfundinvesting.com. It's a source for where you can find me, or you can find me on this, or Facebook, or Instagram. And I hope that helps. All right.